Well, it's 6 o'clock, so I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. This is a work session meeting of the Manitou Springs City Council for October the 25th, 2022. I'll mention that we have, my understanding is Councilwoman Johnson and Councilman or Mayor Pro Tem Shada are going to be joining us via Zoom tonight. And I understand Councilwoman Wolf is running a little bit late, but nonetheless, we'll go ahead with the roll call. So Councilor Chandler.
Present.
Councilor Weatherholt.
Here.
Councilor Fortune.
Present.
The mayor is present. And Mayor Pro Tem Shade, are you there? John, if you can hear me, you're muted. So if you could, and Natalie, you're also muted. So if you could unmute and.
I'm here. John, Mayor
Natalie.
Graham, I'm here.
Thank you, Natalie. Mr. Shada? Mr. Shady, we see you unmuted, but we can't hear you. We haven't heard you. You're muted again. Unmuted. We're not hearing anything, John. John, we're going to have Judith, Councilor Chandler text you. Maybe you can text her if you can hear me. Okay. Let's just make sure that, let's go around the table here and make sure everybody, John can hear everybody. Michelle, you want to just,
Hi, John.
Judith,
Hi, John.
Nancy?
Hi, John.
Okay. John, if you would text Judith and make sure that you can hear them. And also Natalie had announced that she was present via Zoom. So if you've heard her, let us know.
Mayor, may I make a suggestion? If Mayor Pro Tem cannot respond to anything, I think an email tonight as he's going through, if he can start putting together, compose any thoughts or ideas and send it to Hannah and all of council so we can have that on record from tonight. So if he has any comments, suggestions or thoughts, if he could just start composing an email and send it to all of us at the end of the meeting would be great.
Okay.
And then we could even read it in the public record.
Okay, good. That sounds like a good suggestion. Okay. Okay, great. So John, we're going to assume that you heard Denise's suggestion. If you'll go ahead and communicate via email to council, that would be good. Okay, let's go ahead and get started then. Well, we do have approval of agenda on the agenda. It's a work session. We don't normally do that, but I'll call for approval of agenda.
So moved. And I'll second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye. Aye.
Hi.
Great, thank you. Okay, well, let's push on. So tonight we just have one item, land use and development code discussion. And I believe this has been about 20 years in the anticipation and many, many hours in the last year, 2 years, something like that. So it's a huge piece of work and we're devoting the entire evening to that. First, I'd like to mention that we have paper copies of the slide presentation. So as we go through that, what I would ask council to do is, because we have so much material to cover, if you'll jot your questions down on paper so you can remember them. I think the format we want to do is we'll let Hannah and Jen present. We're going to present the first two chapters and then we're going to catch up. We'll ask our questions then. We'll maybe take about 10 minutes, go around the table, ask questions. If we don't get all the questions answered, that's why we wrote them down. We're going to push on so we can get through this tonight. We'll do, I believe, you want to do chapter 3 by itself, then questions, chapters 4 and 5, questions, 6 and 7, questions, and then the rest of the evenings for questions or discussions. And when I say the rest of the evening, I'm thinking 9 o'clock would be a good time to be done, but we'll see how it goes. That said, so a couple things, just a timeline. I think now we're anticipating that it'll be January when we probably get this in final form and do final approval. We anticipate, Denise, maybe you have that off the top of your head. We were looking at this in first reading, I think on November the 15th. Okay, so we would have, council would have about 3 weeks to mull this over in your leisure. So we can give this a good thorough looking over in a scrub so that when we come back November 15th, we can make some progress, and then we'll be giving ourselves until after the first of the year to finish this off. I think it's we're getting close. We're getting close for a touchdown, and I look forward to seeing this go into the code in January. Okay. That said, I know there's been a huge amount of work that's gone into this. Natalie Johnson has attended most, if not all, those meetings. She's been really the council liaison position for this. Natalie, I think if you feel up to it, if you'd like to say some words about the work that the committee has done, I think that would be appropriate.
Sure. Yeah, I don't have anything prepared, but along the way, I have mentioned how remarkable it is that this group has spent so much time and energy on this project. And I'm sure Hannah has a better estimate than I do, but I calculated somewhere in the neighborhood of 500 hours that these volunteers have invested in this process. And then, of course, bringing Hannah on and having her jump in and tackle this has been huge. And I just feel really fortunate as a community that we have the staff that we have and the volunteers that we have to get us to, a place like we are today. So I'm just the little cheerleader here, reminding everybody that we live in a remarkable place.
Great. Thank you, Natalie. And I guess I just like to add too, that this has been, a year ago, council, we were meeting jointly for a while with the Planning Commission, and we began to appreciate the enormous nature and the complexity of the problem. So council very much understands the difficulty that the committee has faced, and we're impressed with the work you've done. And Hannah is taking this over and getting your baptism of fire. This speaks well to your professionalism. Jen, it speaks to your professionalism and endurance. And Alan, you're the only one who showed up here, so out of the committee. So we want to extend our thanks to the committee. You'll be their representative. So pass our congratulations and appreciation on. Okay, Hannah, the floor is yours.
Great. Did you want to say a couple things or should we dive right in? Okay. So I wanted to do a really quick intro before turning over the presentation to Jen. It might sound a little harsh, but in my professional opinion, the current code is broken. It is. I think that everybody who has worked with the code, including Alan and the code committee, would agree that there are definitely things that have a lot of value in there, but that they just aren't implemented correctly because they don't have the right teeth, or it's just not, it doesn't mesh well. And so this new version takes a lot of what is good about the existing code and enhances those things, plus takes ideas that people have been talking about from what I've heard from the code committee and actually makes them requirements. So I really think that with this code, we will start to see development that better reflects what Manitou expects Manitou to be, right? It's kind of ambiguous. You're not really, when you talk about the Manitou feel, it's really hard to put your thumb on exactly what that is, enough for it to be code language. But I think this code does a really good job of getting us one step closer. And I wanted to make sure to also say that progress is almost just as important as perfection. We never will totally fit. There never will be a perfect code for anything because it really depends on who you're talking to. There's always going to be one typo that slips in there. But as long as this is seen as progress in the direction that Manitou needs to go, then that will be a huge win for the city. And of course, I also want to communicate that code doesn't have to be so cemented. It can be a living document also. So if we find that one of our requirements is just not working, or it was worded weird, or it doesn't get what we were hoping it would get, we can change it. So over the next years, we'll definitely be doing audits of the code to make sure it actually is doing what we hope it to do, and that it's being implemented correctly. And if it's not strict enough, then we can go stricter, or if it's too strict, then we can lighten up in a couple areas. But definitely viewing it as a step in the right direction. And if we need to readjust some things at some point in the future, we definitely can do that. I know Jen will dive into this, but the code committee has put in such a significant number of hours. So while it was staff who kind of did the typing, that being Jen and I and her team, it really was the code committee and all the boards and commissions and the public outreach that we did that honed the direction of these topics. So we presented informally to the Planning Commission, got some really good feedback that is reflected in the code. We presented to PARAB, OSAC. We went to the URA twice. We talked to the Climate Action Working Group, who had representation on the code committee. We talked to the Housing Advisory Board, and tomorrow, I just couldn't get the timing to work last month, but tomorrow we will be going to the Mobility and Parking Board just to get their blessing, hopefully, on the parking requirements. So we had that community open house as well last month. I can't believe that was already a month ago, but it was pretty well attended. If you had an opportunity to visit us, I would say the first hour we had maybe 40-ish people come in attendance, and that's great. You know, it's really hard to get people to care about code. It's kind of boring. But it was great to see the community show up for something that is a little ambiguous. Sometimes you don't really know that planning and zoning is important until you're suddenly thrust into the middle of it. So I do want to thank everybody who was able to come that evening. You will see some of their comments reflected in the document as well. Tonight, what we're really hoping to do is get a high level, not high level, we're going to go a little deeper than high level, but a look at the topics and just make sure that we're going in the direction that we need to go. We are going to take the actual draft document to the Planning Commission November 17th. We have a special meeting set up, which would be then City Council on December 6th, and hopefully second reading in January. We are anticipating getting the actual draft language to the City Planning Commission 3 weeks in advance. And that also means getting the language to the City Council for review at about 2.5 to 3 weeks in advance as well. If you're looking to review the code line by line, which you definitely can do, I will warn you, it is a very hefty document. It will take more than a couple of days to review. So my recommendation would be to dive in the weekend that you get it and just start working through things. I think it would be important as you're starting to work through those things to hold periodic one-on-one meetings with council members so that we can work through some of your questions before we get to an actual hearing. This is not a quasi-judicial item, so it is legislative. We can work back and forth, have discussions about things, and just make sure it's what you would expect. And with that, I think we're ready to move on. The draft that is posted now does reflect some of those high-level discussions minus the 4-hour meeting that we had this morning. So we'll make a couple more adjustments to the URA zone district, the mixed use zone district, and the sustainability menu, plus some other technical things. But from here, what we're hoping to do is just make technical edits as well as some formatting changes, pending how this discussion goes and how Planning Commission goes. And with that, I think I'll turn it over.
Great, thanks, Hannah. And I want to just say congratulations to Manitou Springs. This is a huge effort to take on. Congratulations to staff, to everyone for really taking on this effort. And I mean, I know we've all said it, but thank you to the working group. I mean, they have just poured their heart and souls into this document. So, and it really shows. So without further ado, I am going to walk through some slides. Oops. Okay. So just a quick reminder and overview of the whole project. We did kick this off In December of 2020, with kind of a soft kickoff with staff, contracting the project, really kicked it off heavy in January of 21. And from January to May of 21, we saw a lot of events. So we had a project kickoff meeting. We had internal code review where we started to really understand the code, the existing code. We pushed out a few questionnaires. We had an initial questionnaire that just asked the community, you know, what do you think is good and bad or needs to be fixed with the code? We had a few subsequent questionnaires based on specific topics. We did stakeholder interviews. I'll go into the numbers on those in a minute. We did have an open house, but we were right in the middle of just heavy COVID at that time. So we did a virtual open house over a period of a couple of evenings. And then out of all of that came the assessment report. So we developed that assessment report that you all hopefully remember, brought that to a joint study session to talk through. And we all agreed that that was the path we wanted to take. So from there, we moved into the topic specific joint work sessions that we had last summer with you all in Planning Commission. We engaged the working group at that point and had a couple of meetings with them early on and started to reorganize the code based on the assessment report that we had proposed. Moving into September was when we kind of pulled things back into the working group's hands, started really meeting in earnest with them, started to draft code language and review and revise what needed to be updated. And started developing some new graphics during that time. So we start to develop the graphics in tandem with the language so we can kind of massage them as we go as well. August of 22, so just a couple of months ago, we spent about a month with the working group. We had a final consolidated draft that went out to the group. They spent, I think, 3 weeks reviewing it. And then we spent a couple of weeks discussing edits and updating the plan, the code, getting it ready for the first public review. So it went out for public review in September prior to the open house. We had that open house and now we're moving into what we call the true adoption phase. So as Hannah said, nothing is ever set in stone with the code. It'll be a moving target right until the end when we finally say, okay, it's good. Here's the effective date. Let's move it on. So definitely still, time to massage and edit as we need. Oh, forgot which thing I was doing. Working group members, we had a couple of additional members at the beginning. They, after a month or two in, dropped out of the race because it was a huge commitment and they are already on several other committees and said, I just really can't dedicate the time. So the 7 folks that you see on the screen here were the 7 steadfast working group members that stuck with us through here to the 4-hour meeting this morning. We had over 30 meetings after this morning's meeting over the last year. And as Natalie mentioned, it was over 500 volunteer hours. So we added up, each of those meetings was about 2 hours. A couple of them ran a little longer. So quite a huge dedication from this group. They deserve a giant dinner or something to say thank you. And then just by the numbers, I just wanted to kind of state, we had the 2 open houses. We had the open houses at the beginning and then the in-person open house here at in the last month. We did meet with 38 individual community members through the stakeholder outreach at the beginning. In addition to those 38 members, a lot of you might remember we met with the Climate Action Working Group and the Housing Advisory Board, the URA. We met with a lot of those advisory groups in addition to that 38. So the 38 doesn't capture how many people we really talked to. I'd say we talked to more than 100 people at the beginning of the project. We had over 300 questionnaire responses in total across our questionnaires that went out. We had 7 joint work sessions with City Council and Planning Commission over the last year, not including kind of from here forward going through the adoption phase. And we've had 12 meetings with the advisory boards. Like I said, we've met with HAB, HPC, COG, MAPS, PARA, OSAC, and URA. URA we've met with probably 3 or 4 times now throughout the process. I believe HAB we also met with a couple of times at the beginning and then once here towards the end. And then MAPS, we've had a couple of meetings early on with MAPS and then we're circling back with them tomorrow. So kind of the general overall updates that we had talked about early on were we've combined and reorganized the code. We've renamed it, so it is now the Land Use and Development Code. So instead of having your zoning regulations and your subdivision regulations and your sign code, it's all together in your Land Use and Development Code. Based on these 7 chapters that we're going to go through tonight, the general provisions, zoning districts, development standards, use standards, subdivision regulations, application procedures, and definitions. We added a lot of graphics and tables where it felt appropriate, and added an organizational table of contents at the beginning of each chapter. So when you open the chapter, you can kind of see what's in that chapter. I just wanted to highlight some top priorities that we've discussed in the past that were carried through this process. Reorganization and simplification, check. I think we got that. We added graphics and tables. We talked a lot about preserving Manitou's character and really creating a code that was tailored to Manitou. So you knew you were in a different area, that you left Colorado Springs and now you were in a different community. Providing basic commercial design standards, incorporating sustainability, improving the landscape standards, adding parking in tandem with mobility, kind of thinking about parking in the broader picture, and simplifying the application procedures. So I'll leave it up to you when we get done this evening to see if we addressed all of these priorities. I think we have addressed all of them in some fashion. All right, chapter 1. So we're going to go through chapters 1 and 2, and then we can pause for some questions. So chapter 1 is primarily existing language that's been recombined into the chapter. So it brings language from titles 16 and existing titles 16 and 18, really just the front end language. It establishes a purpose to this code. It establishes a title, establishes the effective date. And we added a severability clause, which states that this whole code can be looked at in separate from the rest of the municipal code. We clarified non-conforming regulations, seeing that Manitou has a lot of existing structures and a lot of historic structures that quite possibly are already non-conforming and could potentially become, hopefully we haven't made anything any more non-conforming, but really clarified those standards to help administration move forward. We did add a section on review and decision-making authorities where we've defined the planning director and their role, the city engineer and their role, because they're mentioned throughout the document, so that at the front end, you have the definition of who they are. Define the planning commission and the city council. Planning commission and city council's roles are actually in, I think, chapter 1 of the municipal code. So we didn't want to reiterate or copy anything out of there. So we have referenced those sections. So that's primarily what you'll find in chapter 1. And as I said, a lot of the language came from existing chapters 16 and 18. And then we've updated some of the language, some of the antiquated language. Chapter 2 is our zone districts chapter. Again, this is also largely a lot of existing language with a few edits or tweaks. And we'll highlight what those are here in a second. But one thing that was really clear from the very beginning of this project is that building height is a very sensitive issue. And so not only looking at building height throughout the whole code, but looking at how we're defining building height. So we took a really long, hard look and really had actually several conversations on tweaking the language. Even up until this morning, we were tweaking the language just a little bit further on how to truly define building height. In addition to that, we've rolled in some, and it's not too different from what's in your existing code. It's just, tweaked a little to be a little bit more specific. We've updated the graphics as well. We've added some language for accessory projection. So anything that might project up on the top of the roof, it wasn't clear in the current code how that might fit in. And so we've added an allowance for extending beyond 5 feet beyond the measured building height for things like HVAC equipment, chimneys, things that would typically extend into that space. Also allowing church belfries, and we've allotted that parapets. So if you have a flat roof and you have that parapet on the front, it can extend up beyond that 5-foot height. Affordable housing was another new addition to the zone districts chapter. We had a subcommittee of our working group that actually worked through this analysis to come up with the numbers that you see here. It does allow residential density to be increased by 25% if 25% or more of the units are provided at or below the price point that would meet 100% of AMI. I know that's a lot of numbers, but it basically says your area median income, 100% of the area median income, if you, in whatever that number is, if you make enough to fit in that category or below, that's what we're trying to target for the affordable housing. I'm losing my voice already. And this graphic is just kind of a general representation of what that basically means. So if you have, 25 DUs per acre that you're allotted, like in the mixed use zone district, which is the URA area, this density bonus, if you were to meet this, you could get up to 31 DUs per acre. So it's not a huge density bonus, but it's enough to bring in those affordable units and potentially enough density to make a project work. The new zone district is the mixed use commercial zone district. You all might remember some conversations we had early on about overlays and combining zone districts and adding zone districts. And what we landed with is primarily we kept all of the existing zone districts. We've tweaked a little bit of the language here and there to clarify. But this is our new zone district, and this does replace the redevelopment overlay. So the redevelopment overlay that sits over the URA now, this would be rezoned as mixed use commercial. A lot of that redevelopment overlay language served as the foundation for this zone district. And then we've kind of adjusted it as we've gone. The biggest points to point out is that we did increase the density from 15 density units per acre to 25. The building height remains a max of 35 feet with there's incentives built into the URA area. And just this morning, we fine-tuned some of those incentives that could allow up to 39-foot building height if you're on the south side of Manitou Avenue, 50 feet away from the right-of-way. So you'd have to be south side 50 feet away, closer to the highway, and with commercial on the lower floor. And the reason for that is to allow that additional height for the floor plate in the commercial, because oftentimes your commercial floor plate is more of a 15-foot height, and then you have 10 to 12 feet for your additional floors. So we landed on 39 feet so that we're not exceeding a 3-story building, but we're allowing for that commercial use on the main floor. And like I said, kind of in that second tier behind the first tier of buildings that would be right on Manitou Avenue. Lot coverage remains 75%. We did add a maximum front setback. So to try to keep buildings close to Manitou Avenue, keep them pedestrian friendly, we kind of created a min and a max so that the building couldn't be pushed all the way back and can't be too far forward. So it kind of gives you a range in there. And we clarified those development incentives. We put that all in a table that hopefully is a little easier to read. All right, that's it for chapters 1 and 2. So I'll pause for any questions.
Okay,
And
great.
maybe get my voice back.
Great. Yeah, and Julie, just to kind of bring you up to speed here, what we're going to try to do, like we're doing chapters 1 and 2, and now we'll do our questions. So maybe about 10 minutes for questions. We'll go around the table, and then they're going to give 3, and we'll then have a question period for 3, and 4 and 5, question period 6 and 7, question period. So, and part of the idea of having the paper slides is so you can jot questions down if you have them. So with that, who has questions or comments? Judith?
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, I would just like to start by just reiterating what a phenomenal work product this is. I am so impressed with you and the committee and the boards and commissions. So wanted to just start off with that. And I don't want to scare you, but I just felt like my way to honor this process, really honor you and all the work everyone's done, is to actually read it. And I'm about 3/4 of the way done, and I know there's going to be updates. But to me, if I'm going to vote for something this important, and I think that it is one of the most important things that I think that I will do on my tenure on council, I just wanted you to know that up front. And I only have one typo suggestion for you, and I thought it was important enough to bring up. So it happens to be in chapter 1. So I wanted to put that out there. And the reason why I'm picking on this typo is I think it's one of the most important things we talked about, and it's in 18.01.5. That first sentence is a run-on sentence, and I think it needs a period after standards shall apply, because it's talking about the most restrictive standards shall apply, and then the next sentence doesn't make any sense, and it kind of negates that whole first paragraph. That second sentence kind of, I had a trouble rereading that until I realized that that should be at least 2 sentences. I do have just if if there's anybody from the community that's listening, could you just let us know again? We're talking about feet, and I know that's important here. But I know people often think in terms of stories, right? And that's really nebulous because, some people think of 8 feet as being high, or 10 feet for a ceiling, and 15. So can you just kind of let us know, because I'm pleased to see that we're not seeing 4 and 5 story buildings. I'm thrilled about that. And I'm thrilled about the 3-story setback, the 3rd story setback. I love that. So could you just remind us what 30 and 31 and 39 feet really look like on the street?
Yeah, well, the Holiday Inn Express is 35 feet high, I believe. Am I correct? It's 40. It's 40 feet high. Because I think they got a variance for the additional height. So to give you kind of a perspective, that building is 40 feet high without a step back. And typically your typical floor plate is about 10 to 12 feet per story. So you could assume a 3-story building is going to be somewhere in that, 32 to maybe 40 foot range.
So I will just say that I'm a little concerned about things approaching 39, 40 feet, and then you're giving another 5 feet on top of that for allowances for HVAC, and that brings that up to over 40 feet. And so I am concerned about that. And with the density, and also, can you just describe to us what it means to increase a density from 15 to 25, and explain that to us? I'm not sure what that measurement means.
Yeah, I wish I had my images with me because it's on the ground, it doesn't look that terribly different. So the box that you're fitting that in is probably going to look fairly similar, whether it was 15 or 25. It makes more people, obviously. So once you increase that number, now you have more people and more cars. I will say across the board in both in this community and in a lot of communities I work in, when we're trying to get multi-household dwellings, apartment type buildings or such, people are looking in the 40 to 50 to 60 DUs per acre range. So 25 is still actually very, very, very low. Even with that density bonus up to a 31, that's still a very moderate and I think appropriate to Manitou sized kind of a apartment building, if you will. So,
And will these structures have to have on-site parking?
yes.
Okay, so, and I know you're meeting with them tomorrow, so we'll
Yeah.
talk about that later.
Yeah, there's some kind of incentives for an optional parking, but yes.
Does the 39 feet include that 5 feet for HVAC, or is that in addition to?
That would be in addition to.
So it would be over 40 feet. It would be greater than the height of the Holiday Inn Express.
Correct.
If-
Well, the building, the top of the building would be at that 39, but yes, your HVAC could extend beyond that.
Okay, and when the HVAC and those things extend beyond that, are they on the 3rd floor that's set back 10 feet? Is that where that resides? So at least there's some break in there.
Correct.
Okay. And that's all I have for chapter 1. I have a few questions for chapter 2, but I can take my turn.
Okay, does anybody have anything for chapter 1? Julie?
I think this is chapter 1. I have trouble telling what's chapter 1. Are the 18.01 is that chapter 1 still?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, there it is at the top. It says chapter 1. because I was, okay. Let's see, 1801.8.1. Can we look at that for a minute? Let me see. Here we go. Oh. Okay, so subsection B there about the planning director, it's talking about the decisions of the planning director are final, and then the next sentence refers to administrative decisions. So are we to assume that, I mean, I would assume what you're wanting to say is that the final decision made by the planning director is considered an administrative decision, so that the public knows which section to look for if they're dealing with appeals from that. And I thought that could be made clearer.
Yeah, I think that could be.
Instead of saying the decisions, maybe add a sentence that says these decisions are considered administrative decisions, because a lot of people might not know that. And I thought that would make it clearer for the public to track it. Then further down on 8.4 B, well, 8.4 is, I assume, is this section referring both to appeals that are taken from decisions that are made from planning commission, as well as quasi judicial hearings that are held in the first instance in front of council, where we only have a recommendation from planning commission? Is it about both?
Yeah, it would be any action that council is taking with regards to the zoning and subdivision codes.
Okay, then in subsection B, where it talks about after council receives testimony and staff report, then blah, blah, blah. Do I assume that means testimony as in input from the public, or is that referring solely to a statement made by the applicant, or was there discussion about that? Because I didn't know if the word testimony had some implications as to who could speak, that I might be missing the nuances for that.
Yeah, thank you, Counselor Wolf. The intent is that it would include both staff presentation, applicant presentation, as well as public input.
Okay, I think that's a big improvement from what we had when the, okay, anyway. I think that's all I had for chapter 1. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else, chapter 1? Judith?
I do have one more question. And I don't know if this is appropriate for a code, but, and it does, Counselor Wolf reminded me, it does, refer to 18.01.8, planning director A, and, we recently, went through a change in our planning director, and in that time, the city administrator was acting as our interim planning director. And because you're recommending some changes later on in subsequent chapters, I'm just wondering if in the code it's ever addressed, if in the absence of the planning director, you know, is there a process that's appropriate to put in the code so that the residents know and the city knows who's allowed to make those decisions? So that's a question I have for you.
Yes, that is appropriate to put in there, so we could add that language.
Yeah,
Thank
and I'm
you.
making edits directly into the draft. Just that's what I'm doing when I'm typing over here.
Okay, it's good. We work as we talk. Okay, chapter 2, any questions on 2?
Is 2 the part that addresses the affordable housing?
Yes.
I have a lot of questions on that. So if a developer wants to purchase and develop property as affordable housing, and they get this 25 increase in density, then how long, if they're going to use it as a rental property, how long do they have to rent it out at the rates that are required by the HUD? I think it's HUD, isn't it? Housing Urban Development that controls the standards. How long, what is the duration on that? Is that determined by HUD or is that something we should know as part of our code?
Thank you, Counselor Wolf. The standard practice would be 25 to 30 years. It ends up depending on the deed restriction that gets recorded with the property essentially. But 25 to 30 years is a pretty standard time frame for rent caps essentially.
And is that time frame a requirement minimum of 25? Shouldn't that be in the code?
I think that's something we could add in the code, that a minimum of 25
Well,
years.
because otherwise, if it doesn't say that, I can buy the property, build it all up nice and dense, have it be a low income rental for 1 year and I'm done.
Right.
And I don't like that. So it was like a glaring omission to me that there weren't all these requirements, at least as to duration. Anyway, yeah, I think that'd be essential. I was also a little freaked out by the 25%, just to be honest, everybody. And I thought, well, maybe that's appropriate in certain zones or certain districts, but I didn't know if it was appropriate in all places to add that extra bulk. And I'm not really comfortable with that, but I don't have a solution to propose other than I wanted to have some discussion on it.
Okay, yeah, I think you've got a couple of good points there, Julie. What I might propose is that I don't know that we're going to solve those questions tonight, but I think probably the purpose tonight is to get a good overview of the document and let them go ahead with their presentation. And then we're going to get the whole thing and it's,
So I'm
minutia.
getting too much. in
Well,
the weeds
I
here.
think so, yeah. I mean,
Okay.
I think, you've got some valuable insights, but I think tonight we want to focus on kind of the overview. Then council will have 3 weeks to go over this document. And so we can
So the more detailed
more
discussion
detail.
will be,
be later on, I think.
Later.
But I think
Okay.
comments like this kind of provide some insight to.
yeah, I
to
just didn't
planning.
want to throw it all out at the last minute. And
Yeah.
then they said, well, this is our last meeting, Julie. And then I thought, oh, boy, I better bring it up now.
Okay.
So I guess I've got it backwards.
No, that's okay. I know okay, great. So if there's nothing else on chapter 2, okay, Judith.
So because this is such a huge deal and it's a huge document, the way I look at it is that any opportunity that we have to give you information as soon as we can and have questions answered as soon as we can. So I kind of took that approach tonight. And I do have a follow-on question about it's 18.02.1.4, and it segues into Counselor Wolf's question about the affordable housing. And it's talking about residential density may be increased up to 25% above the permitted density. So I just want to make sure I'm clear in understanding what you mean, because on the slide it says we'll be already increasing the density from 15 to 25 in the new zone. And what you're saying is an additional 25 in addition to that. So that would bring that up to 31.25. Am I understanding that right?
You are understanding that correctly.
Okay. And then you already answered that question. I had a question about one of the tables, table 18.02.2.4-2, the slope table. Would we ever be building on a slope greater than 40% to 50 plus? I mean, I'm just looking at, that, and because it's my understanding that those are just way too high to build on. So I was just wondering why they were in the table.
Yeah, so we did carry this language over from the existing code. However, both your existing code and this proposed code have kind of a max average slope that's buildable at 30%. So what that means is the slope across your site might be 30%. You might have a spot that's higher and a spot that's lower. So we collectively decided to leave this in to capture some of those nuances. I do agree with you. I don't know that anyone would build on a really steep slope, but they might cut into it and put some retaining walls if it's
Okay.
the only buildable spot on a site.
They
Thank you.
did
That-
that
those
on
are my only
Washington
questions. Thank you.
Street. So they did that on Washington Street. So it does happen, but
Yep.
they have to go through lots of engineering, et cetera.
Nancy.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I agree with Judith that I think it's important to get all the questions out tonight, not to necessarily discuss and answer them or come to solutions, but at least to get them on the table. So if Julie has more issues she'd like to raise, I do think it's important to get them out there at least.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, yeah, I think so.
wanna-
It's-
Two different opinions. Did we already cover the part that pertains to non-conforming use, or did we not get there yet?
That would be part of chapter 1. We can go back to,
Yeah, I had it
Non-conforming.
in italics somewhere, and it was talking about. Oh, shoot. Can you tell me what this numbering system blows my mind, I'll tell you.
yeah, it's 1801.7.
Okay. Oh, here, thank you. Okay.
Mhm.
I was reading something maybe it wasn't this section. There was something that talked about, you might be able to get some kind of a variance, a height variance, if you're in the historic district and you are having to completely upgrade your non-conforming use because of a major remodel or project. And it said you would be, could be granted a height exception if you're in the historic district. And I thought it would be more appropriate to say, and if the home itself is considered contributing to the historic, because I wouldn't want someone to be able to just we have plenty of homes in the historic district that aren't really historic, where they could get this height variance just because of where they are. And I just didn't like that. Unfortunately, I'm not seeing that in this particular section. So maybe that comes later when we talk about you separated that part out.
I did find it. It's item D1. It says the damaged structure may be rebuilt to the previous dimensions, setback and height with no expansion.
Yes, and then you have an exception for that later when you talk about redevelopment of nonconformities. Maybe it's there under 1817.2. Let's see. Anyway, we don't have to find it right now because I don't want to waste all this time nitpicking on, we've got so many pages here, but that was just something, if you see it or as you're going through, that I wanted to address whether the rebuilding of non-historic structures should really be getting height variances, even if they're in the historic district. I think that's all I had though. Thank you.
Okay, great. And we'll have the opportunity, council members, if there are things that come up later, if you're like me and you wake up tomorrow and you think of something you forgot about, we can email our questions to Hannah so that she'll have a chance to research them and push us along. Okay, any other questions on chapter 2? Okay, if not, let's tackle 3.
All right, chapter 3 is the development standards. The reason we're doing this one a standalone discussion this evening is because there is a lot in chapter 3, as you probably have noticed. Basically, this is all of your development standards that would be applicable to potentially any type of development. So we're just going to highlight a few things that are in here that are new or different. So we did add commercial site and building design standards. You all will hopefully remember a year ago when we were talking about this, we had developed some pretty extensive standards to review. There was some discussion about pulling those out into design guidelines rather than codified, but keeping the essential pieces. So we just kept the very basic essential pieces that the working group and staff felt were really important to Manitou's character. Building orientation, building height and scale, building in those step backs that Councillor Chandler mentioned earlier. So at the 28 feet, which is roughly a second floor, it would not go into a third floor. At 28 feet and above, you have to step the building back a certain distance so that you don't get the monolithic facades. Building materials, we did add some cool roof requirements. And we did add some development relative to Fountain Creek, very minimal. It started bigger and kind of whittled it down to what we felt was the essential pieces, and added a site amenities requirement for, I think it's 4% for some sort of plaza space or public art or something to be added to the site. Exterior lighting, your current code, in a couple of these I've added existing code and proposed code, so you can kind of see the difference. The existing code doesn't really have much in the way of standards. There is a requirement for a lighting plan. So we added some requirements to get a little closer to more of a dark sky type of requirement, looking at full cutoff fixtures, which means like the image, it illustrates that the light is downward directed. We do realize that there are several lights fixtures along Manitou Avenue that do not meet this. And so there was some discussion about whether to put this in the code. In the end, we decided it was a good place to start from to kind of build in some base standards. And then we added standards to regulate light levels and color. There are a couple of additional standards on lighting height and some different things. It's a fairly minimal section, but wanted to highlight that. Landscaping is not a minimal section. This was brought up pretty early on as a desperate need for your code. So we really worked hard to build this out. This one went through several rounds of review with the working group to get it to a place that people were feeling really comfortable with. The existing code has regulations on the landscape plan requirements. So similar to the lighting, it had the plan requirements, but not a whole lot more. So we've added general landscape standards, referenced a plant list. We have found a plant list that was created at one time. It's not currently on the website. So Hannah and I are working on getting that in the right place so that it can be linked to this document directly. We carried forward a lot of those landscape plan requirements, added water usage identification. We added a lot on vegetation preservation standards. That's something we've discussed quite a bit. Added standards for specific areas. So now your streetscape areas have kind of a specific standard. Commercial, multi-household units, that type of development has kind of a standard. Parking lots have their own standard. And then we added screening and buffering standards that are referenced throughout the use standards. So anywhere that you have outdoor storage or something that needs to be screened or buffered, it references back to this section. Alternative energy was also brought up as a priority at the beginning of the project. The existing code there's nothing too specific on sustainability or alternative energy. We added electric vehicle charging infrastructure requirements, added solar infrastructure requirements, and then probably the biggest piece is the sustainability site improvement standard menu, which requires all new residential and non-residential buildings to achieve 5 points, which when you really look down the menu, there's a lot of kind of low-hanging fruit that could achieve that 5 points rather easily. And that was done intentionally to kind of build a foundation for this section. It's something that can be audited and edited throughout time. So, let it sit for a year or so, see how the applications are coming in. And then, if that point number needs to increase or additional incentives need to be added, then it's something that can be manipulated. The current draft that you all have does have some additional relief for additional 5 points. In our meeting this morning, we peeled some of that back. So we have talked about removing the density bonus, the building height increase, and the landscape material reduction, and just leaving in the outdoor amenity space reduction to simplify this procedure a little bit. But the menu has some items for affordable housing, some additional electric vehicle charging stations, low impact development, pervious pavement, additional landscaping and trees, native plant material, rooftop gardens, and renewable energy systems. So there's a broad variety of options to choose from. Mobility or parking. Again, this section, the existing code does have a parking plan requirement, parking space standards for the size of the spaces, and a large list of minimum off-street parking space requirements. We tried to simplify the minimum off-space parking requirements. It now fits on a half a page, and it's a little bit more generalized to the use categories rather than each individual use. We've removed minimum off-street parking requirements for downtown. So downtown will be exempt from meeting that minimum. Added a maximum parking requirement so we don't end up with extensive parking lots that are not needed. We've added an alternative parking plan option. So if you have a application and you feel that the minimum number is just more than you need, you can submit an alternative plan, and there's some requirements that go along with that. a shared parking standard. So again, if two applicants feel that they're, one is a daytime use, one is primarily a nighttime use or something to that effect, they can work together to create a parking plan, a shared parking plan. We added bicycle parking and a requirement for low impact development, which is like your bioswales and stormwater management. So here's your new parking table. As you can see, it's been condensed quite a bit, and instead of detailing out every single individual use, we've used the overarching categories for each use, as they're fairly similar within that category. That's the end of chapter 3.
Okay, questions? Judith?
I haven't gotten all the way through chapter 3, so, and this is I'm gonna put this out there. This is personal. I'm having a personal issue with this at my own home, so I'll put that right out there. It's 18.03.5.6. I'm curious as to why you would only allow 42-inch high fence around the front of a property. And I'll use my property as an example. My front of my property faces west. It's on Becker's Lane. And we're remodeling it and we're putting a front porch on it. And we're finding that we can't really use our front porch because there's lots of traffic and lots of speeding and lots of, buses and lots of audible trolleys. And also at night, we've got now some significant light pollution from the Becker's Lane condos. And it's just how it is, right? And so, but actually those weren't really the two reasons we were planning on putting a 6-foot wrought iron fence up. Our main goal is with climate change, we want to work toward having a landscaping that incorporates raising vegetables, raising our own food. The problem with us is that on any given day, we have a dozen deer in our front yard, so that it's impossible. And I think we have to consider that, that if we're going, I don't mind if we change this, that you can't have a solid fence, that you need to see through it, and we're not in a corner. But I think it needs to be looked at because we can't do this well, we have deer in the backyard too, but we have red rocks in the back and we have all sorts of critters, raccoons and, bobcats, but the front is the place that we wanted to do that mixed garden. And we've got to be able to keep the deer out in order to do that. So I just want to have that conversation now about that to see if there's, a change that can be made in that 42-inch height of the fence. So, and I haven't gotten through the rest of the chapters. So that's all that.
Thank you, Counselor Chandler. I think where that came from, and Alan might kick me if I'm wrong, but I think maybe where that came from was to allow, or what I've seen before is lowering the maximum height of a fence in the front yard to make sure that a fire department can get into the property more easily. However, they can still jump a 6-foot fence, and for public safety reasons, making sure that eyes on the street can still make sure that somebody's not like breaking into somebody's house or something like that. So I think we could go back and consider raising that maximum as long as it was a see-through fence with like a gate that somebody could get into. I think that is something we could look at.
And that's Colorado Springs has 6-foot code. So I don't see that that's a big stretch. So thank you for taking another look at it. Thank you.
Can I just ask, I think we need to be asking, does all of council agree with that as we move forward? Because we don't want to go change one thing and then we come back and it's like, no. So I think for all of the suggestions, we need to make sure that all of council that's here says, yes, this is what you would like for them to look at.
Thank you. Yes.
Okay. Well, actually, we'll maybe come back to that. What did you want to say? Go ahead, Julie.
I was just going to say, in terms of process, I thought where we settled was, or maybe this was just because I was tuning into Nancy's suggestion, that we would just throw out different concerns, different ideas, different questions tonight, but not really have the time to hash through them all, to see if we're in agreement or not in agreement, just for someone to put a footnote somewhere to say, fence height, residential fence height, so we know to come back to it rather than necessarily voting or fleshing out each of these issues. Does that work though? Because I'm not sure going forward if that means we're putting too much work into the next session.
Yeah, I kind of like that, put all the ideas out there and then kind of come back later, hash it out later. Now, we could, I guess we could do a quick, just, show of hands or something to see how many people feel that's important. So Nancy, you go ahead.
Yeah, I'm kind of, I had hoped to come into tonight, not to make decisions or to have long discussions, but just to put everything on the table and have, I would assume you're going to have another meeting with the committee before, or is that a false assumption?
It was dependent on how tonight went. If there was a significant, we need to change a conceptual direction, then we would need to go back to the code committee. But for smaller things, then maybe we can do that.
Yeah, okay.
Without going
Just
back.
because I haven't heard that many dramatic changes tonight, and I'm hoping that trend continues. We'll see. So I really wouldn't like to give specific guidance to change anything tonight. That's kind of what I was hoping we'd do tonight in terms of process.
Okay, I think you're kind of echoing the sentiments that Julie expressed and that I said to some extent. So if the philosophy could be that we throw these ideas out there and get through all this, and then you can take a look at it. And there's probably pros and cons, when Judith started talking about deer, I was thinking, oh my God, 42 inches is not enough. You just about have to bulletproof your yard with all the deer. And I can't see any place in Manitou where that wouldn't be a concern. Anyway, so with that in mind, okay, so Hannah, can you basically just take the notes and realize it's not cast in concrete and have a chance to see what the pros and cons are?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We
And
can do that.
we can come back, and maybe that's, these haven't been, doesn't seem like these have been such earth-shaking questions. Judith?
This is just procedural. I just wanted to make sure to let you know that Mayor Pro Tem Shada said that he would take the administrator's suggestion in email. And I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't sure if he needed to weigh in at all on chapters 1, 2, or 3. So, and Natalie as well. So I just wanted to make sure that we didn't leave them out. That's
Right. Yeah, I've been checking emails here periodically to see if they've had comments. I don't see anything, no. Okay. Michelle?
On page 14 of the slide, what does outdoor amenity space reduction mean?
So let me see where that was. In our commercial site and building design standards, we have a site amenity requirement of 4%. And then in the sustainability menu, you can reduce that space by doing some of the items off the sustainability menu. Yep.
Any other questions on chapter 3? Okay,
I do have
Judith.
just a general question. It's not really about chapter 3, but you brought up a really good question. So how, given that, our staff is very busy, how do we plan to enforce that? You know what I mean? When we have a developer come in and they go, we're going to, have these options, we're going to take A, B, and C. Is there going to be a process in place for checking and making sure that in fact these development guidelines are being followed?
That's a great question, Counselor Chandler. Yes, there is. There is an existing framework with the major development plan where we need to start taking those very seriously as the final product, which we'll talk about when we get to chapter 6. But there's also, if we have everything shown on a major development plan and then they start constructing things, there's multiple points where staff can do inspections, including at this stage when they need a certificate of occupancy. Zoning is a required sign off for certificate of occupancy from the regional building department. And that's when we would be on the ground, making sure those installations actually happened. If they were to remove it after a CO issuance, that would be a code enforcement issue that we would have full force of, or for full authority to write up a violation which is also a major thing that's being added to chapter 6 is the actual process and tools available to our code enforcement officer.
Anything more in chapter 3? Okay, I think you want to do 4 and 5 as a unit, so
Yep.
back to you.
All right. Chapter 4 is the use regulations. Probably the biggest change in this is reorganizing everything. So we, the current uses are listed in the zone districts. So in each zone district, you'll have a list of permitted uses, a list of conditional uses. They're very, as we started to pull this together, very inconsistent, different terminology used in different zone districts. And it was kind of creating a whole web of how this all works. So we've pulled that all into a new use table, which you can see a snippet of here on the table or on the board. So we've categorized kind of residential uses, household living, all the different household types, and then so on and so forth through all the commercial uses. And then we've given them a P or a C in each zone district. So whether it's permitted or a conditional use. At the very bottom of the list are your temporary and accessory uses that have some different designations of accessory and at A and T for accessory and temporary. This has seen a lot of massaging through the working group, changing the terminology. And the reason I left this slide up, as you all might remember, we had some early conversations about single family, multi-family and removing the word family. So we had settled on single household detached. So a single household detached unit is what you would think of as like a single family standalone home. A multi-household dwelling unit is kind of like your apartment complexes, and there's 2 different sizes. We did add a mixed use dwelling, which was kind of a combination of several things. And I think I have that coming up in a slide, but so we've updated the permitted and conditional use allowances in that table. We really spent a lot of time looking through it and kind of going over it and then taking a step back and looking at it again. Throwing out different scenarios to try to fine tune that. As I said, there's a bunch of new uses. So mixed use dwelling used to be very, very long. It was residential above first floor and it kind of went on and on and on. And so we've combined that into a mixed use dwelling because it would be only, in a mixed use setting where it's mixed with commercial. We've retooled youth home into group home because it can accommodate adult and youth. Recreation entertainment, there's a couple of different recreation entertainment uses. Maker spaces, breweries, distilleries, and wineries. I think we had brew pubs in the existing code, but we didn't have specifically breweries and distilleries and wineries. We've brought in workshops, transit facilities, solid waste facility, recycling facility, and then a few temporary uses. We've changed special event is kind of in your code now, but we've just given it a really solid meaning and definition: art and craft fairs and produce stands. The residential uses, as I stated earlier, we've changed the terminology and really looked at where they should be permitted and conditional. Commercial zone districts, what we really did was take a look at downtown versus the commercial zone district versus the mixed use zone district to really make sure that they were differentiated by the uses. Because if they were all having the same uses, then why have 3 different zone districts? So we really tried to take a look at that. There are a lot of similarities, and then we've tried to pull out the differences. And then we'll go into chapter 5. We removed all of the procedural language from the existing subdivision title 16, put that into chapter 6 with all the other application procedures. Once we pulled all that out, chapter 5 or your subdivision regulations shrunk a lot. So it's just a tiny little section now. We modernized the purpose statement. Your subdivision section was the title that has probably been touched the least over the years. So there was a lot of really antiquated language that sometimes we were even reading and saying, what do we mean by this? So we tried to modernize the language throughout, added clarification to the applicability section, added clarification on flag lot definition and requirements. That was a big discussion that we had with our working group on how that really works. Clarified the when and how of improvement guarantees and updated land dedication requirements. Not anything major, just some kind of little tweaks here and there to clarify that language. And that's it for chapter 5. So if we want to talk about 4 and 5.
This is going pretty well. Questions on 4 and 5? Judith?
Not just a question, but I really love the table in chapter 4. I mean, that was just to me, I mean, that was like this candy after reading it all. I noticed in the definition section, chapter 7, there were a few definitions that were missing, and flag lots is one of them. And I'm assuming that this picture is that is what a flag lot is that you have a single driveway for more than one single household dwelling. Is that correct?
There's actually 3 graphics that go with flag lot now. This is just one of them. So a flag lot is where you have your standard lot that's served on the public right of way, and then a lot behind that's served on a long driveway. This graphic actually shows if you have 2 flag lots, you can have 2 individual driveways going into those flag lots. If you have any more than 2, we have a 3rd graphic that shows that needs to be a common driveway that then peels off into the individual driveways.
So so if it's
One.
more, then it's one common driveway for how many?
3 above 2, so 3 or more. would
So 3 or
require-
more. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. And just putting that in the definition
Yep.
section. Yeah, that's it.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Other questions or comments? Okay, let's push on.
All right, chapter 6. If Counselor Chandler liked the table and uses, I hope she also likes the table and application procedures. We've been doing this in a lot of our codes and find it very useful, especially for our planning directors, because they can just cross-reference when an applicant comes in and says, I want to do this. I really have no idea what my process is. It's very clear. It's, here's your variance, here's your review authority, here's your public noticing, then here's where it is in the code. So the biggest change was creating this procedure table and reorganizing all of the application procedures. We clarified the public notice procedures. There were some inconsistencies and some nuances and actually just some older language that needed to be cleaned up. Tried to simplify the language a little bit. We developed more specific variance criteria. That was something that we heard loud and clear at the beginning of the process. So we based a lot of it off of Denver, I think. A couple of the working group members said they really liked the way that Denver did variances. So we started to look at a lot of other communities, but that one specifically. So you have 2 required criteria for all variances. So you must meet these 2. And then there's a list of 7 that you have to meet 5 of. So any 5. So that should help the applications coming through with variances be a little bit more specific and a little less subjective. We did replace minor conditional use with a specific short-term rental application, since really the only application that came through as a minor conditional use was short-term rentals, which made major conditional use not necessary. So now it's just conditional use. So now you have a short-term rental and a conditional use. We updated the subdivision plat decision-making authority to administrative and added additional review at Planning Commission and City Council through the development plan. Hannah can talk a little more about that if you'd like. And then we added a waiver of replat process. Hannah, do you want to expand a little bit upon the subdivision?
Yeah, I would love to. So just to draw some attention to that procedures table, we are adding an additional step for public notice as well. So there would be, and this would be brand new, a requirement to notify adjacent neighbors upon an application coming into our department. And that would really help with the development plan process, because we would be getting feedback early enough in the process for it actually to be effective. So then you're doing less negotiating or discussing at the actual dais. We had an opportunity to work with the public, work with the developer in one room, maybe a neighborhood meeting is part of this picture. Having that submittal notice will be key to lessening the discussion at an actual public hearing. The reason that we're recommending a change to the administrative or to the review authority of the major subdivision plat And I think that we are fine to, in theory, discuss a project that was recently brought before the city council that had to do with historic cabins, although we couldn't speak about specifics of that decision or that project. In that particular project, because it helps paint the picture, right? With that particular project, we had a major development plan and a future subdivision plat. Coming into this project at the 11th hour was a little bit too late for any influencing of a direction. However, with this particular code, the major development plan would be the final product. It would be exactly what is supposed to be built and exactly where those property lines should be and exactly where the buildable area is, where it shouldn't, determining all those specifics related to a development. That would still have a review authority with the city council. So we would still be taking that to planning commission for a recommendation, still taking that to city council for the final decision. It would be the final thing. It would be what we would expect to see on a subdivision plat. I am recommending that we change the major subdivision plat to be an administrative decision purely because it is just a technical document that is meant to implement the development plan. So it would have to match exactly what was shown on that development plan in order to be approved, essentially. Really, a subdivision plat just solidifies the maintenance of tracks, solidifies property lines, shows the exact meets and bounds, has surveyor statement, easement statements, things like that, that are for the most part also on the development plan. We would not be approving a subdivision plat that was not represented as in the development plan. So like with this cabin project, which is legal to do in our current code, where it was approved with a maximum number of lots with the ability to adjust a little bit in there with that tier, a higher review geologic hazard report. With this new process, all that stuff would be required upfront with that major development plan. So everything that you see on that document would be within your authority at that time to make comments on. It would be the final thing. So then the subdivision plat would come along and it's just the technical document that solidifies what you already approved, no changes. If there was a change, we'd have to go back through an amendment process or a new development plan to get that reapproved. That's the reason why I'm recommending that change. We would be implementing a stricter development plan through the code requirements, but also through the checklist. Currently, the checklists for major development plans are just copy and paste of the code, which isn't helpful. So the new checklist would be it would actually outline what exactly we're looking for. So we're looking for a traffic impact study that has to show X, Y, and Z data sets. We're looking for a tier 1, 2, or 3 geologic hazard report, depending on these certain parameters. It has to show these data points, so on and so forth. So we would be presenting a final product by the time it got to City Planning Commission and by the time it got to City Council. There wouldn't be a second step in the process.
So thank you for that. I had lots of, flags around that issue and I really appreciate you clarifying that. I have a much better understanding. I was leaning toward no, and now I understand better, but just using the Cheyenne Village as an example, what I hear you saying is that tier 3 study would have had to have been done before that came to us. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
That's
That-
correct.
Okay,
Yep.
so because that would have been tremendously helpful.
Mhm.
Okay, so that's my, thank you for that clarification.
Yeah, and I should say that that this particular project is, everything was approved according to code. There is absolutely nothing wrong with the project. It was all done above board. They just have this flexibility built in now. But based on public comments, and I think support this decision, we need that final product earlier. And so this change would help us get to there.
Julie?
So just for clarification, which seems a lot more efficient what you're proposing. But so that would show, I'm guessing just like in addition to the lot lines, it would show the no build area and the setbacks and all of that. And then it would be up to the individual developer should they decide to purchase the lot to build whatever they wish within the confines of that and within the code, of course. So it's just all one process, is that right?
That's correct. There would be that administrative process of actually recording a subdivision plat to create the lots, but it would be a mimic of what was approved in the development plan.
And then once that's done, then the developer wouldn't have to come back before a planning commission or anybody else, presumably unless there's an HPC element, is that right?
That's correct. If they were just building, so if they were building a single family home, they could move forward with the building permit unless they needed HPC review. If it was a commercial product and they were building exactly to what was approved, it's all platted, they could move forward to the building permit, being required to have that development plan as part of the building permit to make sure it actually gets built that way.
Thank you.
Other questions? Comments? Judith?
Well, I'm hogging all the stage here. I do have a variance question. So I don't know if we're still on the other issue or if I can address that. It's 18.06.4.2. And I'm just going to say up front, this is not a hill I need to die on. I just want to tell you my 25-cent issue I have with variances in general. Because a variance in my mind is there because there are no alternatives, right? The developer does not have any alternatives. And I have lived here long enough to see that some developers had a number of alternatives on, but because it's optional, they can choose not to go down that road. So in my perfect world, because the approval criteria 1 and 2 are fantastic, I would move number F2 up to required, that the developer has to explore design alternatives or alternative locations before, and then have the other options 4 of 6. Because to me, the whole point of going through a variance is that you've explored that there are no other alternatives. And in the way this is written, it gives the developer the option. I was like, well, I don't have to come up with any design alternatives because I'll take all the other stuff. And so that just doesn't sit well with me. And I've seen it be abused in the past here in Manitou. And again, we're just having discussion tonight, but I just want to throw that out is I would like to see, that more robust with looking at design alternatives or, structure. So that's all I have to say about that.
Okay, thank you. Julie?
I just thought of something else. I have no idea what chapter this is in, okay? But I was just thinking that, what was I just thinking? Shit, I lost my thought. What were you just talking about?
Talking about variances and the required
yes,
versus the
yes.
optional.
Well, when I was on the planning commission, what I would hear all the time is that the alternative is then we won't be able to have the ceilings as high as we want, and we won't be able to have that 3rd floor bonus room that we were hoping to have, and that way we can get the great views. And frequently, at least in the residential context, there really wasn't an alternative to, they would just tell you the alternative. We don't like the alternative. So depending how you word that, I'm not sure, but also it's a different matter. Okay, so do you know how in the commercial zone, we added something already that said that if there's a conflict between the right of way and the boundary line, then we'll measure from the end of the edge of the right of way? I think that should be, it seemed like it was only limited to the commercial zone. I think that should apply to like the multi-use zones and all of the zones, just in the event that we have some goofy mix up like that again. But I have no idea what chapter that would be.
I think that was in the measurement section of chapter 2, and it does apply to all zone districts.
All of them.
But we
Not-
can clarify that if it's not clear.
Well, maybe right
So-
now we just have as an emergency interim measure, something that applied, I guess, just to the commercial, but I'm glad that's
Gotcha.
across the board. Oh, okay.
Great. Other questions from council? Okay. Let's see, that was 6. We were going to do,
I
guess we-
didn't go over the definitions, but it's pretty short. Do you want me to go through?
yeah, let's
that
go
last
ahead.
slide
and
really
knock it
quick.
out.
So basically, we moved all the use definitions, as you have probably seen, into the use chapter. sometimes it's a little easier to look down the list and then have the definitions and the standards all right there. I know some people are used to seeing them in the definitions chapter and still kind of go there to look for them, but so it's just a kind of a change of using the code. The sign code definitions are separate from the rest of the definitions. I mean, we could combine them. We've kept them separate just because they're a little bit different, and then you can go to one place for them. We removed any standards from definitions. So if a definition said, you know, something should have a something setback or something, then we moved that setback language out so there isn't inconsistencies. And we better define accessory structures. Your current code it was really unclear when we started looking into the zone districts. It talked about temporary structures, and when we got to the bottom of it, that's a temporary accessory structure, like a shed that's not sitting on a permanent foundation. So we said, okay, let's just change the terminology a little and clarify these so it's clear for everybody. And then we updated the telecommunications definitions. I mean, we updated everything, but we really looked through those to make sure that they were up to date with federal and state regulations. I think that's it on that one. So
Let's just, hang on just a second here, Julie. Did you get,
yep,
To a
I
good
got through
stopping
that. That
point?
was it on definitions. So
okay, all right, go ahead, Julie.
One thing I don't know if it's in here or not, but we didn't have a definition of, or a requirement that there be a front door and a back door, or where is the front of the building and where is the back of the building? And I know specifically like on Becker's Lane, when the planning commission approved that condo complex across from Judith's house, I don't know if we missed it or if there's nothing in the code mandating, but it looks like the back of the building with all that HVAC is on the street. And I think there should be something in the code that when we approve things, we're approving it on the site in the direction in which it's drawn and approved. It may be so obvious that you don't have to say it, but I think we do. So if that's not in there, I'd like to see something like that.
Okay, anything else on chapter 6, Judith?
I thought we were on 7.
Yeah, I guess we are. I guess
Seven.
my counting's not very good tonight.
I appreciate you bringing that up because in my notes, just on this particular project, and I remember the council meeting, we were discussing this and is about addresses also, because it's my understanding that the entrance or driveway off the street indicates what the street address will be and where the mailboxes generally are for where mail delivery and where the fire department would come. And again, this particular townhome complex has Becker's Lane addresses, but the driveway into the property, the front of, well, I don't know what the front of the or the back of the property is in this particular situation, but the mailboxes are also off that driveway. And so is that the criteria that's typically used to define an address to also help indicate which is the front and the back of a structure?
Typically, what defines the front of a particular structure is where a property is addressed from, if it's already addressed, where the property gains its primary access, whether that's pedestrian or vehicular, depending on the type of building we're looking at. The Becker's Lane Townhomes is an interesting project. I can't exactly explain why the rear was defined to be on Becker's Lane. I don't know. But I'm sure there was some level of justification. Typically speaking, the front would be what's adjacent to the public right of way, the main arterials. And I think that's how we maybe could define it, is, well, what are people seeing? That's the front. That's what makes the most, that's what's intuitive to me. And if it would add some level of comfort to actually define those things, I think that would make some sense. Yeah.
And I just had one more comment. And I don't know if this is appropriate or not. I'm just throwing this out for discussion. Because it came up when we were having some joint sessions with the Planning Commission and we were talking about affordable housing. And then we all, sat around going, well, what are we talking about? What is affordable housing? Is there a standard definition that we are using for this code? And if so, is it appropriate for it to be included in the definition section? Or is that a moving target?
I think it could be added in that density bonus section. We've defined affordable as using the HUD standard of 100% AMI. So I think we could reiterate that in the definition section.
I think the only risk in doing that, though, is that if HUD changes their standards, then we're not going to change our code. Because I think if I saw it correctly, it simply says that you have to comply with the HUD rules, the Housing and Urban Development federal law stuff. So if HUD happens to be, I mean, don't they change that number from time to time? Or maybe it's always the same percentage and they just change the definition of the poverty.
Yeah, that's
line.
exactly it. So you would
Oh.
keep that 100% definition and then, or 100%, yes. And what 100% relates to does change based on HUD. We're doing a lot of research on, because affordable housing is such a huge issue across the nation, but we do a lot of work in the West, specifically in Colorado. And AMI is, we've come up with, AMI is about the best way to measure it currently. Every community says it's still a moving target and we don't know if it's right. And I'll just give you an example. Salida, Colorado had kind of an 80 to 100% AMI. And within about 2 years, they were doing some studies and said, we need to increase that to 120% to capture affordable, to be truly affordable or attainable. And then within months of that, they said, no, 150, no, now 180. And now they're even looking at 200. So within a very short time span, just watching the housing prices go up and the wages not go up, consecutively, they said, we just need to keep raising this. And so, the Housing Advisory Board might be a great board to kind of keep a pulse on that and say, for right now, 100% is what we want for Manitou Springs, but, and the market actually could start fluctuating down here soon and making these numbers change again. So, but it is the best metric that we have right now. A lot of the housing specialists are just racking their brains for another way to try to conceptualize this, but.
Perhaps we can use the definition being HUD guidelines. Maybe that is our definition. So just putting something in there that we are trying to somehow capture what we mean by affordable housing. And I know that's a hard ask, but thank you.
Okay. Any additional questions for chapter 6 or 7 from council? Guess not. So we had a discussion of next steps. Did you have something I'd like to go over the timeline, but I think you have a more comprehensive grasp of that. So maybe you could give us your ideas on how this plays out.
Right. Thank you, Mayor Graham. So right now we are working, we're at the end of October, which is crazy already, but we're working on final edits based on the code committee meeting that we had this morning, as well as the feedback that we've received tonight, which we'll take back and see what is appropriate and then update the city council. Right now, we have a special hearing planned and scheduled for the City Planning Commission on November 17th. That's a Thursday. That special meeting that particular date allows for this planning commissioners to review the document over the next 3 weeks. Assuming we can get all edits made and published by this upcoming Friday, which I don't see any hurdles for us we should be able to accomplish that. Following November 17th, depending on how that goes, and if we get a vote to recommend, which that would be my assumption at this point, based on the feedback that we had at a previous meeting for this item back in September, I believe. Then we would be going to City Council for first reading on December 6th. And right now we are tentatively anticipating second reading happening at the first meeting in January. That's the timeline that we have targeted at this time.
Okay, thank you. That's, that first meeting, I believe, would be January the 3rd. So. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, actually, that's what I was going to ask council. I hope to have it read in great detail by, by the 17th. Actually, I think we're looking at, no, I'm sorry. I had a note, just for my own benefit of November the 15th. So long about there that week, say of November the 15th. Council, I think if we could get the draft and go over it thoroughly, and if we have questions, go ahead and send those questions to Hannah. I don't think any recommendation any one of us makes should be taken as direction. It's just an idea, so we can go there and then talk about those various suggestions or ideas as a group and see what we feel. So what that asks you to do is really some research in some cases, I think, but not probably to delve deeply, and unless it's something that's just maybe tremendously obvious. Council, what are your thoughts? Julie?
I would like to know, and even if this requires like hiring a techie person, I would love to get the revision in a format where I can type my comments on the side. I don't want to be redlining because I hate all those the lines where you cross out, and it's just too hard to follow. But some of those Google Docs and there may be, is there a way we could do that? Because other than that, I thought, oh my God, am I going to print 233 pages? I'm like, that's a lot of, and so, but it's hard for me to really, dive into my comments if I have like 30 pages of notes on each little section. So that would be so awesome, but I don't know if that's asking too much. I don't know if you can do that.
Thank you, Counselor Wolf. We absolutely can set up something like that. What we've been using with the code committee is a program called, it's actually what I've been using tonight too, Conveo, and it allows you to review essentially a PDF reader on your computer and input comments directly where that comment is applicable to. And it basically spits out a report to us that says, Julie Wolf had a comment on XYZ section and it says this. And so it's really easy on both fronts. We've got positive comments from the code committee using this particular program. So that could be an option. And we can format it where you can see other counselors' comments on different sections as they're making them. It works very similar to as Google Docs does.
Well, that's even more sophisticated than I was just envisioning something for my own note taking so that when I come to the meeting, I have all my thoughts written out. But for me, I think that'd be fabulous if it's not too asking too much. It's a lot easier for me to document my comments right in the text. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, if we could make that happen, that sounds like a really good idea. I mean, we have an opportunity to make the comments, and it sounds like you can look at all of our comments and we wouldn't necessarily be interfering with any given version of the document, so you'd have that. And I saw emphatic head nods from both Farley and Alan, who apparently have used
Could
this, so
we-
it seems
could we
like a
have
great
them
idea.
come up and see if they want to add anything since they're back there, and I don't know if they
Yeah,
have anything useful or.
well, I think that'd be good. I'd like to just do a couple things.
Oh, yeah.
First, so, okay, so we were on the topic of the timelines. That, Council, you think the 3 weeks you could get it done? And so we're talking about the middle of November. Now, I'd also like to mention that November 22nd, which is the fourth Tuesday, that's the week of Thanksgiving. I think we could get our work done and take that night off, and we get it done earlier. Following Tuesday is the 5th Tuesday of a month, which we normally don't meet. So we could have basically 2 weeks without a meeting. That would also let us give us a chance to do some of our homework, if that sounds agreeable. So if that sounds like a strategy, okay, I'm not seeing any objection to that idea. So we'll try and take those 2 weeks off. Means we might have some homework to do, but we can get that done. No objection to that. Denise, comment?
Mayor, so what we have is first reading will be December 6th, and no work session before that. So the first reading will be December 6th for the code. So we won't be coming back to you until December 6th after we've gone to the Planning Commission and the last few meetings that you need to have. So December 6th would be the first reading.
Unless you want to plan on attending the planning commission meeting and hear them hash out some of the detail, maybe. I don't know if that would be repetitive or not, but boy, that's a lot. So we're going to go through the whole code on December 6th. We better bring some
Well,
caffeinated drinks.
Well, I guess, okay, well, the other thing, I guess the question is, we could meet that 5th Tuesday of November, it'd be the 29th. That would give us the week of Thanksgiving, or we could, instead of taking 2 weeks off, we could take 1 week. So let's kind of go around the table and see what works for people. Nancy?
I just wanted to ask if anyone is anticipating a lot more comments. I mean, we didn't get a whole lot that I think were particularly controversial tonight. They seem pretty much straightforward. I'm not anticipating, submitting much, if anything, and I just didn't know if any, we should anticipate that if there's really a need to, I mean, I'll pile on now. I was going to wait till the end, but I'll do it now. I just want to say, Jennifer, thank you and your team for your patience and willingness to put up with some of our schizophrenia over the past couple of years. To Alan and Farley and the rest of the team, amazing work, and your dedication and commitment to this has been phenomenal and so helpful. And Hannah, man, thank God you showed up. Because you're not only with this, but with so many planning things. It's just been so, I mean, the leaps and bounds that we've seen. And I was just so impressed with where this document is today. So and I really appreciated Hannah's comment at the beginning, progress is as important as perfection. And I take that very seriously in that, it's kind of a mantra of mine anyway, is small steps. And as long as you don't go backwards. And I think that this whole draft really, some of the tortured council meetings that we've had, it's so clear to see how this is going to help us as a council so much. I'm sure the same will apply to the Planning Commission, and that it really captures, I think, the values of our community, as well as respecting the landowners' rights and the usefulness of it to them. So I'm over the moon, quite honestly. So thank you.
Okay, great. Judith?
And I'm generally over the moon as well. I think that the committee has done a fabulous job. Jen, you've just been amazing. And again, Hannah, the perfect person at the right time. And as we all know, a code is only as good as the enforcement of it. And I really feel for the first time confident that not only we'll have a good work product, but it's going to be easy to use and enforced. The only heartburn that I have is with the building heights. And I've been going through this. I'm like, okay, 35 feet, I can live with that. 40 feet in the downtown. I don't feel good about now it's 39 feet and then you can add more. I have significant heartburn over that. Because once, if you're talking, especially in the URA and the commercial district, we are going to lose view shed. And I've actually driven my car to Amanda's Fauna and turned around and envisioned, 40 feet up, 40 foot tall buildings like the Holiday Inn all the way through that corridor. And it will just be a concrete canyon, just like Colorado Springs. And to me, that's the only part of this code for me that does not really feel like it meets the character and quality of Plan Manitou. Again, I can live with 35, but I just really, I want us all to think about that, because once that building's up there, once that Holiday Inn Express is up there, you can't lop off any floors, right? And so I want to be flexible, but now's the time to make those decisions. We'll lose all that view going into Manitou and the foothills, and it will, the Becker's Lane condos. I've learned a lot. It has changed the sunset. It literally has changed the environment in not positive ways. I mean, the landscaping is great. We have great new neighbors and I love that. But once you do that, it's done. So again, that's just my only fingers crossed. I think 40 and above is too high.
Thank you. Michelle?
I shared Judith's sentiments with that, especially when she said concrete corridor. I was like, as I come in and I'm thinking, looking to the left, you wouldn't be able to see that anymore, even with LaFun, even with that 3-foot setback and behind, you're totally blocking off the foothills. So not a good idea. Thank you.
Okay, great. Let's see. Natalie, do you have comments? Okay, she's off. I hope she's feeling better. Mr. Shada? Oh, he's okay. All right. So nothing further from John. Okay. Well, I'm pretty happy with the way it went. Also, like Nancy, I think this has been pretty thorough. I don't envision there'd be a lot of changes at this point. And I think what we've brought up tonight, I think some good points. I would ask staff to maybe do a little bit of research. Let's realize that these topics will come back to council. We'll discuss them again. We'll get the pros and cons at that point. Good. I'm happy. Congratulations. Good. I see a couple of hardworking people in the audience. I'd like to give them the opportunity to comment if they would. We have Farley and Alan, both of whom have been deeply involved as committee members. Farley, do you have anything you'd like to say or contribute? And if so, if you'd come forward, please.
Thank you so much. I just want to take a minute to just tell you how fantastic this team has been and what an amazing experience it has been to work with this committee. I've never worked on a committee quite like this, where there was a lot of ground to cover, and many of us, myself, probably primarily me, learning from the very beginning about code, whereas we had other people like Alan who are very versed in this topic. It was an incredible experience, and I just can't give these two enough kudos. Hannah's stepping in when she did, as you said, Nancy, was an absolute, for lack of a better word, godsend. We really, really needed it. It was terrific. So I'm glad you all are pleased. We look forward to your comments and your feedback. We will, the committee will be waiting to hear if they need some more input from us, but otherwise it seems like it's going forward really, really well. So thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Alan?
Well, I really, over the last 28 years, really thought I knew everything about the zoning code. And this has been an incredible learning experience, just to get the perspective of the whole team, learning what everybody's sentiments are. So it's been a great process, and I think we're close, and, we'll haggle over the details, the final 2 inches or whatever to get to the goal line. But I think it's going to be a great product when we're done. So it's been a lot of fun, and I don't know what I'm going to do with my every other Monday. And, maybe I'll start having dreams that don't have to do with height or setback or density. So it's been fun.
Well, good. We don't hear that very often, but we're pleased to hear it. Thank you very much for your work. Jeez. Great idea. Fun. Okay, cool. Denise.
Mayor, I just want to say, I echo all of theirs. I tried to help Jen through this for a little bit, and that was an opportunity for all of us. And then Hannah did step in, and boy, did it change immediately with her leadership, her expertise. And I know, and Hannah never is one that wants to brag about what she does, but there were days that she did 5 nights in a row of after midnight reading this to try to hit deadlines. And I know we may not hit the end of the year, but we are going to hit January. And that is really due to Hannah's leadership and her dedication and to the committee, because there were some rough roads ahead when I was trying to do it. And they kept supporting me and allowed it to happen. But it's really Hannah and the committee that made this happen along with Jen. So I do want to echo everybody's comments and thank you.
Great. Yes, thank you very much. I think Alan told me this has been about 20 years in the making, so this is no small effort. This is a little bit like going to the Olympics. So, great. Not as much fun as the Olympics, Julie says. Council, if any additional comments regarding this topic? Okay, if not, do we have any council correspondence, any items? Nancy?
Yeah, thank you. I went to the URA had their meeting on Friday morning, and they did discuss the fund progress. And one thing that they are very interested in is whenever we discuss the TIF for the Holiday Inn, they would very much like that to be public so that they can participate.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Okay, city administrator's report.
Couple of quick things. One, remember on Sunday, you have your diversity training, and so 8:45 at the middle school. And we're not providing drinks or any of that. So please bring your coffee and your snacks. So it's 8:45. If you can be there ready to start right at 9, we'll go 9 to 1. So that's at the middle school in the media room, and I'll be there to help. But if you could be there at 8:45, that would be great. Nope, it's middle school. Yes, thank you. And we'll post that. The agenda will get posted tomorrow, hopefully, so it will give the exact address. So we have that. And other than that, I don't think I have anything at this time. Thank you.
Okay, great. If there's no objections, we're adjourned. Thank you.